All right, so I want to talk about why startups are good for cybersecurity. Do any of y'all work for startup companies? Do you work for big companies, startups? Well, it's about half and half. Yeah. I'm going to talk about, just give you a little inside look into venture capital, in case you ever wondered how that worked. I've been getting a crash course in that for the last 20 years or so, and definitely the last 3. If you ever thought about founding a company, I'm going to give you some secrets to help you be successful in that. And then if you go raise money, I'm going to tell you the things that, the pitfalls you want to avoid. Does that sound good? Awesome. Okay. So first, just a little bit about who I am and my firm. I work for a firm that I co-founded with 4 other partners. It's called Ballistic Ventures. We're a venture capital firm. We're based in the Silicon Valley. I'm based here in Austin, Texas. I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be able to do that. We focus exclusively on cybersecurity companies. It's the only kind of investing we do, and we're early stage investors. We're generally the first money that'll go into a company. All of us have experience in operating software companies. Myself, I came out of college and caught the tail end of the semiconductor business. I worked for a semiconductor startup, and boy, that was a totally different thing. Spent a little time at Apple Computer, learned how to make software there. Founded and co-founded a couple of cybersecurity companies. One was called Fortify Software, hence the connection with LASCON. And then one was called Alien Vault. And actually, as a venture capitalist, I get to found all sorts of companies, which is probably the most rewarding thing about that job. Other people in my firm that you might know of, I have a dear friend named Ted Schlein. Ted was an investor with Kleiner Perkins, one of the top firms there, and he had done all sorts of cybersecurity investing. I have a partner named Jake Sade. Jake was part of Lightspeed Ventures, one of the big firms, was there from the very onset through its growth. The partner you all would be most likely to know is Kevin Mandia. And I always say, if you know Kevin, I hope it's on a personal level, because if you know him professionally, it's not a good thing for you or your company. Each one of us has a little different background. My background is more in engineering and products. Barmack's a real go-to-market person, although when we worked together, he wasn't the engineering guy. He really blossomed. Kevin, of course, knows the bad guys like nobody else, and Ted and Jake are first-class venture capitalists that are teaching the rest of us how to do that. We've invested as a group in a bunch of companies, individually, all sorts of companies, learned a lot of hard lessons. And I want to touch on our values real quickly, because they do set you apart. So there's a couple of things that we do as a firm. All venture capital firms are going to have a partner who works with you and sees you through the financing, who's on your board. But because of all of our backgrounds being a little bit different, all of us work on all of the companies. We're all incented to. You don't make more or less money on one company whether you brought it in or not. So it's very much team effort. That wouldn't make sense if we were all similar backgrounds, but since we all have different backgrounds, we can help in different ways. There's another. We're getting a few and losing a few. What are they talking about? I still exceeded my expectations. So there's another really important thing. In a venture capital firm's a small business, and it'd be great if we agreed on everything, but we don't necessarily think that's all that important. We need to be aligned. And if someone really has got determination to go through, the rest support, and we'll see it through. It's kind of the disagree but commit rule. And One of the other things that I took to heart, for years I was on the other side of the table from venture capitalists, and you pour your heart and soul out to them and tell them what you're thinking. And they'd say, oh, that sounds wonderful, we'll get back to you. You'd never hear back from them. So I have taken this job with extreme transparency. I explain what we're thinking, what we're doing, why other venture capital firms do what they do. And today I'll do a little bit of that. Even though the camera's running, I'll have to be a little careful with what I say. Okay, so one of the things that I hear people say, especially in our community, oh my God, there's so many cybersecurity companies, and they're right. But guess what? Don't worry, most of them won't be around in a few years. These are historic numbers that really haven't changed over decades. So if you define success as, did you ever, over the history of your company, take in $10 million of revenues? About 99% of software companies never meet that criterion of success. I need to think about that for a second. That's almost all of them. And usually when you say that, somebody will say, whoa, hold on a second. That's all software companies all around the world. There's so many of them that are, hobbies. Okay, fine. US venture-backed startup companies. Let's define success as the investors got 2 times their money or more. And that's now 20%. So about 80% fail. And there's a number I didn't throw up there. Okay, well that's not fair. What if, I'm a special snowflake, and I'm really awesome, and I'm gonna be working with the top venture firms in the world. Okay, so if we took the top 10 venture firms, you're right, it's better. It's about 1 out of 3 that succeeds. So when you're in that group with the top in the world and the best investors, you're looking around the room and everybody's there to win, it's still 2/3 probability that you know. So if you're upset about a lot of companies, don't worry, they'll be gone. But if you have to invest, you got to worry a lot, because it'd be a lot easier to be wrong than right. The first thing that we tell our investors, and I'll share with you, so back in the early days, I love coming to conferences like this and talking to people at Sneak and SemGraph and some of these companies and all the people using the products. When we created Fortify, we couldn't beg you to use the product. I mean, nobody cared. It was very depressing and hard, except but for banks, telcos, and the military. And they cared, right? So that was really back then, those were the majority of our customers. And one of the most awesome meetings I had was the person, he had previously been in charge of security at Fidelity, but he was kind of like a steamy scientist, whatever, kind of old guy they had around. And we told him all about Fortify and what we're up to, and he says, can I take you to lunch? And we go to lunch. And he explains this thing to me. He's like, you had said more than once when we talked, you were going to solve this problem. What problem do you think you're solving? I'm like, oh, buffer overflows. And the guy said, that's not the problem. The problem is crime, spying, and warfare. That's the problem. If there's money to be made, there's going to be, and you got some kind of computer system, and criminals will be there. If there's information that's valuable, the intelligence agency is going to be there. And if there's any kind of command and control infrastructure you'd like to shut down in a war, the military is going to be there. These problems.
Speaking of problems, yeah. Should be the last.
Okay, thank you. These problems aren't solved. These are endemic to civilization. You're not going to solve these problems. We fight these things, and if we fight them effectively, we have a good civilization. If we don't, we don't. And to be honest with you, I went in one ear and went out the other. I'm like, stupid old guy. And about 10 years later, it just hit me. It's like, damn, he was so right. And so you got to have the right frame of mind that, there's nothing here we're going to solve, but there's an adversary, you all probably do this daily in your jobs, who's going to be giving you problems, and you got to fight against them. And as you know very well, it's not going to go away and work for an NGO because you came up with some solution. They're going to figure out another way around. It makes cybersecurity investing a little different than most other fields. And I'll come back to that. But the first part I want to drive home, why should we have so many startup companies in cybersecurity? Well, it's a simple question. Who would you want fighting for you? Does anybody work at a big company? Do you want to trash your company a little bit? Have you ever been in like the big conference rooms and it's like, yeah, and people are idiots. And there's, by the way, this came from Stable Diffusion. You can make your own. You don't need to like make whatever you want. Let's think different and invent whatever. That group of people is never going to be the ones to fight the adversary. So what we have, what our economy's created, we do have 50 little companies in almost every area of cybersecurity going after the bad guys the best they can. And yeah, 99% of them aren't going to succeed. But the one that does is great. And that system will go and go and go. And if we ever took all those little companies working so hard away, and we left it to the big giant companies in the conference rooms and their meetings, we're screwed. So startups are an important way to achieve innovation, and in cybersecurity, it's forced innovation. We don't get to say, oh, hey, when we come around to it, we'll come up with some new thing. No, we have to, because we have an adversary who's compelling us to. And so 100 startups going after that adversary with 1 or 2 winners is a phenomenal way to do it, very efficient way to do it. So that's why I believe very strongly that startups are super important to this thing. And I do want to say, I did work for a couple of big companies. The last was AT&T, and I actually thought it was a great company. But you couldn't get us in a meeting room and us come up with some idea and have a solution out the door in days, weeks, months. It would take years. So even great big companies aren't really the answer to this problem. Okay, pop quiz. Does anybody know who that man is? Probably do, because I gave the answer there. But does anyone know who Eugene Kleiner was, or why he's important?
Kleiner Perkins.
Kleiner Perkins, yeah. But he did something, he did a couple things before that. And so he was a group of, they call him the Traderful 8, that left a company called Shockley Semiconductors, and they went and founded Fairchild Semiconductors. And that company was really the first tech startup, certainly in the Silicon Valley. Before that, it was large companies, and you did what you're told and went and did your thing. Those 8 founders then went off to go found all sorts of companies. Very famously, Intel. Eugene Kleiner became an investor and was a seed investor in Intel. And you can imagine that was probably a pretty good investment, and went on to do all sorts of great things. So, very cool guy. I got to meet him a couple of times. Extremely avuncular, scary guy to be around. And he had these rules, these laws. And they were very funny. I've got all of them there for you. I'm not going to read them to you, but I'm going to hit on a couple of them. They're all incredibly insightful. I tried for the most part to leave the wording the way they were. I had to wordsmith them a little bit. I love this so much because these didn't sound like something he learned in business school. He didn't go to business school, by the way. He had a PhD. These sound like something I forget, he was from Hungary or something like that, but his Hungarian mother or grandmother had told him, Yeah, Eugene, make sure the dog will eat the food. And, that's one that a lot of this stuff is encoded in books now. You can go read the Lean Startup and what have you. But one of the most important things that it blows my mind how people just blow over, does anybody want your product? Are they going to buy it? You'd be shocked how that little detail, gets skipped over for, I'm going to go build something cool. And so really, really, really focus on the customer, what their needs are, and whether they can buy that. The other one I like a lot is take the tarts when they're being passed around and modernize, take the hors d'oeuvres if they're giving them out for free. And what that means is there are going to be times when the market's totally insane and it's AI this and AI that. And people are going to pay up for public companies and acquire things. And that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But that won't always be the case, right? So one of his other famous sayings, even turkeys will fly as long as the wind's blowing hard enough. But you got to be ready for when it's not. But the one of his that I take the most to the heart is you're investing in people, not products. And to be fair to some of his colleagues, they even went a step further. You can take the first one and the last one. What is it? What problem are you solving? Will the dog eat that food? And who are you to go solve it? If those two things are solid, everything in between can change. So you can have super great impact. They had a thing there. The next time Madame Curie comes around wants to solve a medical issue, we're all in. And so the point is, if the problem is really important and the team of people working on it are fantastic, a bad strategy, a bad product, a bad idea, a bad anything can be fixed in a 45-minute argument and a change of strategy. So this is one of the most important baselines of venture capital. I also want to tell you guys about one other thing, and that is, so I'm going to go outside of security and then I'm going to come back. There are lots and lots and lots of rewards for entrepreneurs and investors when there's big breakthroughs and things change, right? So the internet, okay? Well, there's all sorts of new ways to solve problems and connect people and destroy poor kids with social networking and all that. That manifests and you can go make a bunch of money. The cloud, virtualizing everything and moving it out changes everything. We're sitting on the doorstep of a mobile computing. I skipped over. We're sitting on another one, which is the AI. And so when the sands shift and the world changes, you have this huge opportunity to come in and create new things. And the funny part is people often ask, well, why don't the big companies do that? And they actually do. But remember the meeting room with the thing, and they've all got to agree, and the dumbest person in the room's got to have a voice just as strong as the smartest person in the room. They won't do it well. But there's another really important part. When the sands shift and the world's different, the customers don't want to talk to the company that they've been working with. You're yesterday's news. They really want to talk to the startup because you're the new thing. You're smart. You've got the ideas in your head that they want. And so this creates an opportunity for all the young companies to go. What we did create here, and this is actually one of the most hilarious things. You go into venture capital and you think, I don't have to raise money anymore. Oh, no. We're not investing our own money. I mean, we do invest in our fund, but we have to raise money just like the startups do. It is more civilized. The people who, they're called allocators, by the way, the people who allocate money for billionaires and mostly funds and countries and endowments, they're very polite, very smart, very reasonable people. A lot of venture capital people are a little kooky and crazy. So when you're an entrepreneur and you go into a VC, you're going to get, battered around a little bit. When you're a venture capitalist going to the allocators, they're much more civilized. Now they say no, just like venture capital people do. So to raise a fund, you may talk to hundreds of people, even if you've got this great story and great background. So when we go talk to those people, we've got to make our case. And one of the things that we point out is that cybersecurity is no different than all other technology. If there's some big breakthrough, some new thing, there's going to be a whole bunch of companies that come in and address problems with the new thing. You want to take a guess what percentage of companies that I see that are using AI to solve security problems?
Percentage-wise?
Today? Yeah.
100%.
Pretty much. Every once in a while you see one that does, and you're like, hey, didn't you get the memo? Cover on your TPS report. So that's true. But there's another little element that happens. So I can create a new thingy. I can create a new, CrowdStrike. Let's do this, right? I can create a better endpoint because I'll use machine learning to be super responsive and smart and all that. And I don't know, maybe that's true or not, but it sure worked to build a company. And but there's the other side of it that also puts fuel on the fire. The bad guys will use whatever the new technology is to do their stuff. And so we've kind of got these two angles. There's a startup that's going to use the new stuff to do it better than the old company. And then there's whatever the bad guy's going to do using the new stuff. And so our industry gets fueled a little bit more than the traditional technology does because of this adversarial adversarial innovation. The other part that I think is fascinating to see, if you go back to the olden days, there was no security companies. There was just big computer companies, and security was a feature of the computer. And that went for a while, and then you kind of got, antivirus was sort of the first thing, and the response, viruses and antivirus. And then when the internet came along is when we really started to expand as an industry because, of course, the attack surface is open and there's all sorts of things can happen. Mobility in the cloud, IoT, big data, AI, more and more and more and more. Today we have well over 3,000 legitimate cybersecurity companies. And we've got one that's flirting with $100 billion market capitalization. That's a Palo Alto, and CrowdStrike's right there with them. And so our industry has really gone from nascent to pretty mainstream. So to wrap up, remember I promised the second thing we talked about, little how-to VC. On the surface, it's really simple. You got to find some major trend. They're not hard to find because you don't want to find a trend that not everyone's seeing. You want to find the big trend. So big trend right now has two letters, starts with an A, ends with an I, AI. It's great if that trend's going to be enduring because that'll give you more time. Or go find some problem that everybody clearly has, ransomware, anybody? Right? So pretty easy to find what to work on. The next part's really the hard part. So you got to find the best team of people on the planet that can address that problem or take advantage of the new thing. Why is that? Well, what if you have the second or third or fourth best and someone else has the best? And it doesn't mean you're gonna lose, but wouldn't you rather have the best? And then you invest in their company at a fair valuation. You don't want to overpay. You might lose money even on a good company. Help them succeed. And then one of the parts that I didn't mention, so a venture capital fund lives for about 10 years. If you just took your money and you put it in S&P tracking fund over the average time, it's going to double between 2 and 3x. So if you go into venture capital where 20% of the thing's going to work out and they give you the same money that you would get in the S&P, you're not going to be taking that. So you need to be like about 5 times or ideally 10 times, as my venture capital experienced friends say. If we don't do 3 times on our first fund, then this will have been a fun little hobby. And if you do 10 times, everybody and their mother's going to want to invest later. And somewhere in between there, you have to live. And that's really hard to do. Why? Well, what it basically means is you got to take cuts in front of all the big investors out there, because most entrepreneurs are going to go, wow, I got a neat idea. I'll go to Andreessen Horowitz or Benchmark or Kleiner Perkins, or why they're all famous, and they're happy to talk to you, right? So you got to find some way to take cuts in front of them, find the good companies, and off you go. And I'll leave you a little bit with how we do that at Ballistic. So, and share with you some numbers. So we founded our firm roughly about 3 years ago. We've looked at about 1,000 companies, give or take, over that time. We've invested in 20 of them. This is a really important one too that I wish venture capital people would say. For years, I had friends who would go talk to Klein Perkins, for example, and they'd come back and say, oh, they said, no, I'm so depressed. And I'd remind them that their fund has like 25 companies in it. If you were the 26th greatest thing they've ever seen in their life, they're still going to say no. A no from venture capitalists does not mean your business isn't going to work. It means it doesn't fit in their fund. Yes, they could think you're ridiculous and you're going to fail, and it'd be nice if they told you why so you could internalize that. But generally, they think, it could work, but it's not going to give me that 10x return that I need. Or it's too similar with another company in my fund. Or I like it, but I really think there's probably a team out there that's going to wipe you out if they do, and I'm going to wait for that team, and et cetera. There's a million reasons, but they're not all that your company's terrible. Our 3 top pass reasons. So we have a database, we have a CRM system, and Caroline works with me, and for the most part, my partners update it. I update it dutifully, so with the sampling data that's in there, I know that the most common reason that we pass on a company is the team and your ability to execute. Not as a person, not as an engineer, not as a shoe salesman, what have you, in doing what you chose to do. And that kind of gets back to, and I'll talk a little bit about this, what makes the perfect entrepreneur. But that's the number 1 reason. The number 2 reason is the market risk. The dog won't eat the food. We're not quite sure. One of the things you have to be able to do in venture capital, you got to be able to make a decision on your own that is this something the market needs? And then you need lots of people around you that you can shoot off a note to and talk to and get that answer. And so that, and never is it nobody would ever buy this. It's just, it's going to be hard to sell. It's not, it's probably going to be a slow grower. And the last one is the total addressable market. Great idea, super cool. We think people will buy it. It's just not going to be a super big company. And so maybe you wouldn't even want to use venture capital. The strategy that we employ, and I love sharing this because it's such a simple trick, and my friend Ted came up with it. So as Ballistic, we're considered a boutique specialized investor. We only do cyber, it's all we do. Our funds are not huge, between 300 and 400 million. They're not tiny, they're not giant. And our rule is we have to be the first institutional investor. And what that creates is a puzzle that only goes together one way. If you're an entrepreneur of a cybersecurity company, you say, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go and get the guys at Sequoia to invest, and then I'll get started, and then I'll go to Ballistic, and we'll be like, sorry, we can't do that. It's against our charter. Damn, okay. I know what I'll do. I'll go to Ballistic, and I'll get them to invest, and then I'll go to take your pick of any of the big firms. They'd be happy. Now, when we're competing with a deal, they're not going to admit to this, but I can point to you. They do A rounds, they do B rounds, they do C rounds, they do D rounds, and they're going to look at something where Ballistic is invested and say, all the cybersecurity experts have de-risked it. Yeah, I'm interested in that. So that puzzle only goes together one way. That little thing is how you take cuts. So we get to take cuts in front of the big firms. We don't always win because there might be an entrepreneur who made a lot of money with one of those firms and they're really good friends and they, snake those deals. But we do look, I believe, and we scour the market pretty well. I think we see most cybersecurity deals. Man, there's more than 1,000 over the last 3 years. There really are too many cybersecurity companies. The other parts, and this actually can flow to your own personal investing. You're not going to make money unless you make very high conviction investments. So if you make little investments in a lot of things, I can tell you exactly what your return is going to be. It's going to be the market. If you want to beat the market, you're going to have to make bigger investments in a smaller number of things. Had a friend, casual acquaintance when I used to live in Nevada, hanging out by the pool, and they had made a bunch of money with Bitcoin, and they're like, I think I want to buy stock. And I'm like, oh yeah, go buy some Apple stock. So the next weekend I see them at the pool, and they're like, I bought $150,000 worth of Apple stock. And this is when Apple was really struggling. And I was like, I didn't mean for you to take your entire net worth and buy Apple stock. Oh my God. Several years later, I get a note from this person. And it's like, thank you, I $10 million about this stock. Whereas that's a little reckless. Concentrated investments that pan out are the way to make lots of money. I couldn't be more happy for that person, by the way. And then there's another little thing that we do, and I'm going to come back to this in a second, but we do, between the partners, there's over 10, we know there's solidly over 10,000 people that have worked for us who are cybersecurity experts. So just out of our employee base, and several of you are in the room here today, just out of our employee base, there's all sorts of people that we can tap for that. We also will found companies. So 2 companies in our current portfolio, we founded them ourselves, and they were problems we felt needed to be solved. We didn't really see a company out there that we felt met the criteria, so we created them, recruited the co-founders, and off we went. So that's our strategy. And oh, by the way, one of the things we do, if someone asks me to come to an application security conference and tell you all about the firm, I'm happy to, because the more people that know about it and know how we work, all better. So, all right, so let's move to the next bullet point. So you want to start a company. I think restaurants are worse, so let's just say you want to start a cybersecurity company. Remember that first slide. You'll probably fail, and you're not seeing why, or you are seeing why, but your brain's not allowing you to see why. I succeeded, and knock wood, it's 2 are still going in the startups I did. I went into all of them saying, damn it, I know this is likely to fail, but I'm not seeing why, so I'll go a little bit further, and I'll go a little bit further. And I think that negative orientation helped me a lot, because those are the numbers. And then I know what to say, but no, I'm a special snowflake and I'll work with the best. Great, your odds are 10 times better, but you're still likely to fail. And I'd almost rather fail than be struggling along with a company that's small. I can't really let it go because I'm beholden to investors and employees. So maybe that 80% is in a worse situation than the people at the top. Okay, then the most important thing, and this really does come up a lot. Almost everybody I know who founded a company, when we get together and we talk about our past, sad stories. So we don't come from beautiful, wonderful home lives, and by a high percentage. And again, don't feel bad. But my point is, the person that's going to sacrifice everything to build a company is generally not a normal, well-adjusted, happy person. And so even if you are, and you're going to get past that, make sure your family is okay with that. Because to create a company, you will sacrifice everything. And I did it before I had a family, so that made it easy for me. I think a lot of people don't really come to grips with that, and it really hurts them in one way or another. All right, if I didn't talk you out of wanting to start a company, here are the pitfalls to avoid. And the first one, there are a fairly large number of people who have a pretty good idea. They've done the homework. Here's the problem I want to solve. Here's how I'm going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And the first thing we do is pull up on LinkedIn. They've never worked at a software company. And I really have a problem with that one. Because it's like, part of having a rough upbringing, I did work at one of every place. But if I went to go run a farm, the one summer I worked there to pay for college, I don't think I would know how to run a farm. And, I spent most of my life in software companies, and they are tricky. There's all sorts of weird little things you got to learn. And so if you don't have a lot of experience in a software company that got started, first things first, go do it, right? And here's the other one. oh, these guys are great. They come out of Google. And you look and you say, okay, they went to a great college. That's great. And then they come into Google at, $12 billion a year, and they stayed there for 6 years. What would you possibly know about a startup, right? The first 100 employees there, that was such a unique outlier that it might not be the greatest experience. But there's a lot of reasons why people my age don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to go start a software company, because that could take you 5 or 6 years at the very minimum, right? You go into a startup company that's well respected, well backed, and get that experience. If you do, you will get on the radar of the venture capital people. That first semiconductor startup I worked at was a Kleiner Perkins startup. And then when I started working with venture capital firms, guess who I started working with? Now, oddly, it wasn't directly from that, but it was a connection. And they call their buddy and go, oh yeah, he was great, which surprises me, because when I was young, I don't think I was that great. And so if you go to a company that's well regarded, that's backed by good venture capital people, and you kick butt and you do wonderful, you'll be on the radar. And that is such go to MIT or Stanford, yeah, that's cool. But this is way, I went to San Jose State University. This is more important than where you went to school. By the way, I think San Jose State University is awesome. Paid for it myself, and so the value that I got from that is wonderful. But nothing will be more valuable than being at a company that did it, and you were a standout there. That is the one thing you can do. Obviously, great advice if you're in your early 20s. The other really, 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 really big one. If you're going to start a company, even if you didn't do the first one, go talk to venture capital people before you raise money. Why? They see all they're doing all day is talking to people, customers, founders, other people in the marketplace. And if you're not, if you're seeing a problem, you might not be seeing all there is to see about it. They're happy to talk to you. They'll tell you what they've seen, what they're working on, and you'll get a lot of free business advice. And if they like you, and they feel like you're likely to succeed, they're gonna remember you. So later, when you go off and do your stuff and you come back, it's not your first meeting. That's like one of the absolutely freest, simplest things you can do. The other thing that's super important, you got to bootstrap your company, or you got to incubate your company. In other words, if you got a great idea and then you go and you expect someone's going to give you money and it's all going to work and you're going to own it and control it, that's really next to impossible. So whether it's you and your friends are going to live in some place that's next to nothing and eat ramen every night or what have you, and you're just going to bootstrap it, that's fine. You can go to work during the day, get your paycheck, do the stuff at night, that's fine. Double check there's a PII agreement you sign with your employer. But somehow bootstrap it. If mom and dad give you money, that's super, but you want to get something before you go ask to raise money. And that something would be some customers, or at the very least a demo of what it is you're going to build. It'll separate you. You're the person that actually did something versus the 100 that think to do something. Action is everything. Incubate, if your idea is really great, you'll probably find a venture capital firm that'll say, hey, I tell you what, we'll co-found it with you. And now you don't have to worry about the money. You won't own as much. You may have to do your second one to own more. And then the last little bit here, some of the further details from Eugene Klein, he didn't just have the 8 roles, there were a lot of other ideas behind there. There are 4 key risks if you're going to invest in a pre-revenue startup company, especially. The market risk, will the dog eat the food? The execution risk, is this the right team? Can they get it done? Capital risk, is there enough money on planet Earth to do what you need to do, or maybe put a better way? can this group of people go raise the money that you need to do what you need to do? And the technology risk, can it even be done? And without belaboring the point too much, it's not as simple as you'd think. Good investors gleefully take technology risk. So if it's a problem that absolutely needs to be solved, if you're the best team in the world at doing it, good investors don't really have capital risk because they're friends with other investors, so we're pretty confident we can go raise the money. I would gladly fail if it was impossible. Why? Because if it wasn't, then I've got the thing that was next to impossible, and I'm not going to have 50 other competitors. So pushing the technology risk, not for the point of pushing it, but it just has to be done. Those are good investments if you got the right people. And so as an individual, we can't really, well, if you go back and take my other advice, you will affect the execution risk, right? But when you're ready to do it, you're ready to do it. So you are what you are. You aren't going to change that too much, except for you co-founders. The market risk is the one you just don't want to take. So do everything in your power to make sure that what you're working on is something that people really need. And then I think everybody in cybersecurity knows what a head fake our business is. I could go into any conference room in the world and say, everybody who does not care about security, raise your hand. How many people are going to raise their hand? None. Okay, we're all security people. How many people really care about security? Nobody. It's conditional. So if we were in New York, and it's funny, I'm a security person, but I'm still an engineering person. That was my first thing. But if I'm walking down 6th Avenue on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and I got one of my friends with me, and I said, "Oh, you should be concerned about security." They'd be like, "Yeah, it's great, security. Let's go get a beer." If you're walking through Central Park at 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, you say you should care about security, and I'll take one of whatever you got, right? So security kind of comes and goes. So what's great about CISOs, they're paid to care at all times, but our industry has tons of head fakes. There's also, when someone comes from outside our industry and they're like, I'm going to solve this problem, and sometimes it's really fun because they're going to learn that the hard way. All right, and the last thing I wanted to leave you with, and it kind of gets back to what makes a great entrepreneur. That semiconductor company I worked for had a great entrepreneur, but for the most part, they almost always come in twos. And why is that? You're building technology, and so you need an insanely great technical person, just unbelievable, off the charts. Particularly if you're the more business person. Well, you want to compensate with the most incredible technical person you've ever met. Steve Wozniak is one of those guys. And then you want an insane, sorry to say it, bad childhood, driven to the point of maniacism, business person. And that's Steve Jobs. And then the other part is they cannot be burdened by what you're supposed to do. That's just not. You're already, you're not supposed to go build a company. That's not the right, that's not the normal path. And so I wanted to end on that note, and I wanted to ask a favor, and I wanted to have a little Q&A. I'm shocked the timing on this worked out. That's perfect. If you know such people, or if you have ideas, or you're interested, seek me out, please. I should put it up there. My email is very easy. It's roger@ballisticventures.com. I'm always happy to talk with people about startup ideas. If you meet people that are doing that, love to meet them. As you know, it's about a 2% chance that we'll meet somebody and invest, but there's a 100% chance, going back to that radical transparency, that I will give you advice that is genuine and honestly as I can, the advice that I wanted when I was an entrepreneur. And so at the very least, you'll get that advice, what it's worth, and you all got it today. And I also, before I wrap up, I want to thank you all so much because I really thought there was two of you here. So cool. So, any questions about, oh, thank you.
Hey, it's like this idea for now.
Yeah. Yeah, we should all be working on, let's see, so we're security people, so we should be working on, I don't know, consumer internet stuff, right?
Is it worth going to an incubator or an
Yeah.
accelerator?
Accelerator. Let me do the pros and cons.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, yeah, great. So the question was, is it worth going to an accelerator, like Y Combinator or what have you? When I first heard about those and saw them, I kind of was like, that's, if you feel the need to go there, you're probably not ready to do that or what have you. But then I actually sat down with someone that went through one, and it just hit me so much what they were doing. So, there's a little element of camaraderie and that can be great because it's a very lonely job to create a company. But the most important thing they were teaching them was guerrilla customer engagement. They would have to do so many calls a day and at the end of the week try to get customers and deals. I think that's incredibly important and great value. Generally speaking, when we see stuff coming out of there, there'll be younger people, less experienced, and more kind of straight out of school, and they're compensating for that. We don't see a lot of people that, there are, don't get me wrong, but that worked their way up in a really great startup company and then they went that path because it's very expensive. So you end up selling a big amount of your company. So I do think if you're patient, you got time, it's better to go into a startup that you don't want to be too early, you don't want to be too late. Where if you're there getting experience, you want it to be successful. And if you do and you stand out, you're going to find that you've got your bosses and the founders of your company, and they're going to be your angel investors, and they're going to hook you up and all sorts of stuff. But what they teach in those incubators are phenomenal. And there is a pattern that you see a lot. And we don't see it as much in cybersecurity, but we do occasionally get into super bright, really ambitious, go-getter people come straight out of college, and they'll go through one of those incubators, and they've got an idea, and we don't take a lot of those because, it's sort of hard. If you have a lot of experience, you may find, okay, they're just teaching me to make a lot of phone calls and stuff, and I could have read the book. And so if someone was coming straight out of college and they want to start a company, I would still tell them, go find, and what's funny is you think about, like, what's the right startup right now? I'm trying to think, cybersecurity, pre-IPO, somebody's still growing like crazy. If you could have caught abnormal security a few years ago, that would have been a great one because everybody knows it sneaked at the right time. Maybe Gem or one of these cloud security. Going in there and spending a few years would be great. And yeah, do the combinator as a side thing, but do the math on how much money it'll take. Yeah. And now, when I mentioned you could incubate with a venture capital firm, the same economics there, but you're not worrying about money at that point because your co-founders are a VC firm. So, is that a good answer? I don't have a real concrete.
Yeah.
Sir. Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd love to take you up on your offer to be able to come to talk to you sometime later. So
You got it.
thank you for making that possible and great talk. You mentioned something with respect to bootstrapping or going down the incubator route, and
Yeah.
those are, in a sense, diametrically in the other direction. And one of the things that I've heard, having been told to me, is, yeah, you want to bootstrap it with friends, family, angels, right, to get some momentum going. But then on the other side, when you go to the VCs, because there is a vested investment, and if there are too many investors or so, you actually find it that the VCs don't find you appealing anymore because who's going to be in control at this point?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying.
So what would you say, where is that inflection point
Yeah.
for us to say, I can go to Bootstrap or maybe ideate and then find a VC who would work with you to actually build it together, right?
Yeah.
It's
So, did everyone hear that? Is back room, so you probably all heard it. Okay, so you bring up a really good point. Bootstrapping could be getting my aunt, getting my uncle, getting another person, and you end up with the cap table having 50 or 100 people on it, and a percentage of the company owned by non-professionals. You will scare off investors.
Right.
Now, if your thing is really great and you're really great, your investors are going to come in and say, hey, we need to clean up the cap table, and if they all sign an agreement, we do that every so often, right? But it's still that. The best way to bootstrap. So by the way, there's a group of people that have about a 50-50 success rate. Remember, 20% was the best one I heard. Anyone want to take a guess who's at 50-50? No? Founders who have successfully founded a company get to 50-50 and actually get the third and the fourth. The second is a little wobbly, the third and the fourth, they're golden.
You mean with the previous successful exit?
Previous successful exit. And so they're bootstrapping with their own resources. So the best is bootstrapping with your own resources. Remember, and it's all about patience, and so few people in the world have patience, but if, and again, I really, I'm in a job where I signed a contract for 10-year terms. 10 years plus the age I am now is really old, right? So you do get to a point where you got to be less patient. But if you go into a great startup, maybe you're a manager level, and you work your way up to a director level, and it goes public, you're going to have money to bootstrap, right? So if you took that path, now you're going to have to take all the money you make and bootstrap versus pay off your house, pay off your car, have the cool stuff. That's where you're probably not a regular person, right? That's the best bootstrapping. The bootstrapping, though, that I would say is also great is Wozniak jobs. You build enough just with your own grit. They had day jobs, and then you go get some customers and you got some money, and you do that for a while. The reason why the bootstrapping is so attractive is not just that you'll have more leverage. You've proven that you move forward, and the greatest ideas in the world are meaningless compared to the thing that moves forward, right? And so you bring up a great point. There is too much bootstrapping, and then you kind of are lost in a different world. But a little bit of your own resources is awesome. There was this thing, CFCs, customer-funded companies. Those are some of the greatest ever. One of the most successful and least talked about software entrepreneurs is a gentleman, I think he passed away not long ago, named Goodnight. Bob Goodnight. He's the founder of a company called SaaS Institute. Never took investment, ever. Built a product, got customers, built more, got customers, a multi-billion-dollar-a-year company. In big data, vended off everybody and their brother. And so SAP was a services company, and they built a lot of that. So as a venture capitalist, I'm not supposed to tell you to bootstrap that much. Come see us, we'll give you money. I spent way more of my career as an entrepreneur than a venture capitalist. Bootstrap, bootstrap, bootstrap. The flip side, and I do want to stress, accelerator, incubate. I probably should have been more careful when I use that. Accelerator is kind of a numbers game. Come on in, you'll be a part of a cohort, we'll get you in the pitch in front of everybody. It's a big amount of your ownership, and you're still left to your own. Incubation is you find a venture firm that's going to be your co-founder. Now you got money, you got access to customers and all that. I believe every venture firm in the world has 2 or 3 things that they're like, damn, I wish one of these would come through the door. They haven't. Well, if an entrepreneur comes through the door who can make it happen, okay, then you're in business. And my first startup was incubation at a venture firm. And so I still had to go raise money because a venture firm can't fund its own investments. So each round of investment has to be somebody new. And so I pitched my heart out and I said, oh, that's great, we'll call you back. And we never did. So I get that, I trust me.
Well, thank you so much, appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you hang around, we can talk afterwards. Yeah, can I get in real quick? We'll come back around.
My question is, you involve any psychologists in your evaluation people? Because what happened is, for my sake, just observing,
Yeah.
I see this person must be optimistic, he must inspire, he be knowledgeable too, what's doing. If you look at Steve Jobs or Henry Ford, economics, or whatever, they have all these three things, they inspire people, they're over, they have a
Yeah.
vision, and also they're optimistic because business sometimes have a bad time, but we always believe we're going to succeed. No?
You know, I'm sure there are some firms that use psychologists. I do know that myself and most of my friends who are management people went and read all the books on the big 5 personality traits and understand people as best we can as lay people. I do fear that a lot of founders probably would test out in some strange buckets that we might not want to look. We do, and I think everybody does nowadays, run these very extensive background checks. And we, first and foremost, on our investors, because think of all the money out there in the world that wants to, land, and you don't want to have anything to do with it. Not at least with, making money for some criminal organization, but they might kill you if you lose their money. So these background checks are insane. In so much, most of us are probably more of you are closer to my age, so that we don't have a big litany. But every young person you tell, just be careful what you put online, because when someone runs a background check, they're going to get all of it. But I do want to stress, though, it's so rare that hacker and hustler personalities in one person. It's just really, really rare. And so that pattern of having two makes it so much easier. And then one of the things that we look for, we're way more interested in how you could inspire and recruit other people than you doing it yourself, right? So the person that can recruit the absolute best of the best is way more valuable than I can do it myself. And that, we all know that will work, right? Great, you have another question?
Can you explain the idea of vesting for founders? So a lot of
Sure.
founders, because I was a bootstrapper, so a lot of my friends who have done that, they're like, yeah, I don't own my company, they keep taking it away.
So there's an important, I'm going to start with something else. There's an important thing, when I was a manager, I made sure everyone who worked for me knew, and I drew a little triangle with 3 circles on the edge, and I said, top one's authority, the left one's leverage, and the right one's persuasion. So the first thing is authority is an illusion. There's no such thing. Authority comes from you have leverage. I'm going to fire you if you don't do it. Okay, that's leverage. Hey, you want to do this? It's really great, and you can make it more popular. That's persuasion. So those are your 2 things, right? One of the things you find in a startup is you're going to learn more about leverage than you ever knew existed. So when you found your company and you bootstrapped it and built it, if you had spent that time and you're the person and all sorts of people say that's the person, and you got the first few customers and your investor says, I want you to vest, you're going to say no, and they're going to say, all right, that's fine, and you're not. If you don't, and you don't have the experience, they're going to want you to vest. Now, I sometimes will tell them, I think you should vest. Why? Because at some point during the journey, you're going to hate this company, you're going to hate yourself, and it's not for me, it's for you to not allow yourself out. I'm actually convinced people to do that. So the vesting for founders is really just an insurance. It could be for the founder themselves, it could be the venture firm, and whether you get it or not is leverage, 100%. And likewise, when you sell your company, nowadays, they want the founders to vest everything back. And I would never go for that,
What do you mean best everything back?
So you built your company and you sell it to somebody and you're gonna make all this money and they say, yeah, but we want you to vest that back over 4 years. And that happens.
So you have to keep staying at the new company.
New company.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and, you know, hopefully you had an employment attorney go through everything and every caveat's there, and I always found that, they didn't used to do that, that's a new thing, and I just found it ridiculous. The last time that was proposed to me, I went, well, what about my house? What do you want to do? This is massive, I'm not gonna give it to you in order to sell my company. Leverage, so it's all about leverage, where you end up on that spectrum. I do think at the beginning, if you're a founder and you're vesting your ownership, big deal, you're probably not gonna leave. There is that point though where I hate this, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna go be a monk, and oh, it's right. Investing.
Well, a lot of them have told me that like when they raise again, they're expected to vest again each time, so they're never fully vested.
Yeah,
And like eventually you need to vest if you're there
Yeah.
like 5-6 years, it's like, you have to lose it.
there's no hard and fast rule about that, but one thing that does happen, you know, a founder may or may not become an executive. And at a certain point, their company would need to hire the head of engineering. And the head of engineering would have a certain salary and a certain amount of stock. And so it's reasonable for the founder to say, hey, I know I own a big chunk of the company, but I'm fulfilling this role, so I would like that stock. And so founders a lot of times will end up vesting because they slide into a management position. And that gets in arguments, but that's what I was, you know. Yeah. And I know that venture capital is not this popular, so there must be another.